Chapter 31 Another Way Continued. Sunset stumbled back from the bookshelf. She fell to the ground and held her head in her hands. At first, both realities were true. Sunset hated Cadence more than anything as a teenager, just as she had adopted her as a beloved little sister. Twilight was her nemesis that had taken everything from her, just as she was Sunset's pupil. Her mind slowly reconciled the fact that the two realities did not coexist, but the memories remained. Vivid memories of a world that was impossible, yet seemed so real. It had been a better life. Sunset had been happy. She hadn't achieved everything she wanted, and she had suffered personal loss that she otherwise wouldn't have, but she had still been happy with what she had. All of it hinged on one conversation going differently. She remembered that day in the library, but she had walked away and not looked back. If she had stayed, would everything have been different? Sunset didn't want to leave. She didn't want to return to the ash trail to continue walking endlessly. She remained on the ground for some time, hoping something would happen, hoping that she could somehow return to the world she had seen. But nothing happened. Time passed, and the only change was Sunset resigning herself to her fate. The path she was on had run out, so she stood up and turned around. There was no other way to go. The way back to the ash path was short and easy to find. Although she hadn't seen the crystal path from the ash one, now the two converged at the point she had first left the trail, creating a proper crossroad. As Sunset returned to the trail of ash, she found herself much less sure of it. Before it had seemed familiar, and that had been comforting. Now she knew what else there could have been. She kept a more careful watch on the world around her and realized it was not so straightforward as she had thought. She could make out things around her, big shapes that seemed to disappear when she tried to focus on them. That's not really for you to know, now is it? Sunset grimaced. After having seen a world in which she and Celestia had a complicated yet positive relationship, hearing those words again stung. She barely found it in herself to look up at the memory. You could be great. I thought I saw compassion and sincerity in you, but it was nothing but ambition. You're being selfish. You need to step back and reflect. Every word struck like a blow. The words in the memory had always hurt because Celestia had been the one speaking them, but never quite like this. No, being a princess must be earned. I have been trying to teach you everything you need to know, but you've turned from it. Every time you say you deserve to get something without the effort just proves to me that you are not ready. At the time, Sunset had been so sure she was right. Years later, self-hatred had brought her to the point where the memory had hurt because she knew what Celestia was saying was true. But now she knew that even if the words were true, they didn't have to be. Sunset Shimmer, I am removing you from the position of my pupil. If we cannot get past this, your studies end here. You are welcome to stay in Canterlot, but you are no longer welcome in this castle. Sunset looked into Celestia's face, saw the anger in those magenta eyes. I'm sorry. No, the guards will escort you out. The memory came to its conclusion and Celestia fell to ashes. Sunset remained staring at the space where Celestia had been. But there was no undoing the past, and she knew that. The only thing she could do was keep going down the path that she had made for herself. There was no other way. When Sunset continued walking, the path was lined with even more red spider lilies. They grew along the sides and down the middle of the path, making them practically unavoidable. Sunset gave up trying. More painful memories followed, this time all humans. She saw Violet Dusk watching out for her when Sunset was a young girl. Sugar Breeze after Dewdrop had been adopted and she had hoped in vain that Sunset might become a friend. Rose Petal trying her best with an unruly adolescent. And Sunset knew that was just the surface. There were so many people who had meant her no harm, and yet Sunset had wound up making them all miserable. And that meant it was only a matter of time before... Sunset? Applejack. She had seen this coming. Hell, she had anticipated this exact memory. Thank you. Sunset weighed her options. She knew what happened in this memory, and there wasn't much point in reliving it. A pointless look around showed that there was nothing new to be seen, and Sunset made up her mind. Well, you saved my life. Sunset reached her hand out to Applejack's shoulder, and the memory turned to ash immediately. She felt guilty, but it was pointless to hear that conversation again, unless it happened differently. Sunset looked to the path ahead of her and saw no end. If it worked once before, it might work again. And really, what did she have to lose? Sunset stepped off the path to where Applejack had been. With nothing to stop her, she walked ahead. Once again, the ground changed beneath her feet. It was solid and still made noise as she walked on it, but it was more of a rustling sound. She bent down to feel it and realized it was grass. Sunset closed her eyes for a moment. She didn't understand what was going on, but she was beginning to see patterns in the world. She focused on what she knew, that she was standing on grass, and opened her eyes again. She could see the grass beneath her feet. It was slightly overgrown, and there were apples scattered about. Sunflowers lined the path, and Sunset followed it. The ash path had been familiar. The crystal path had been enticing. This one was peaceful. Sunset felt more calm walking on it than she could remember feeling in a long time, maybe more than she had ever felt in her life. That came to an abrupt end when the ground beneath her opened up, and Sunset fell into the burning cold water. Even though Sunset was back in her bedroom in warm clothes in a heated environment, she was still shivering. She was sitting on the floor while Applejack was on her bed, and the only sound came from the CD she had playing. Sunset knew that wouldn't last, though. Sure enough, it wasn't long before Applejack forgot their agreement to not speak and said, Sunset? Yeah, thank you. That wasn't fair. Sunset didn't deserve that. For what? I mean, you saved my life. Sunset hung her head. No, I almost got you killed. It was an accident, and you came in after me. She knew what she should say. She knew that she should tell Applejack that it hadn't been an accident, that Sunset had intended all of it. Convince Applejack that she wasn't worth trying to save, no matter what the cost. Sunset knew that, but she couldn't say it. The words were right there, but she couldn't bring herself to do it, couldn't stand the thought of Applejack thinking that low of her. It doesn't matter. I'm not someone you should be thanking. Fixing my own fuck-up shouldn't count as a good thing. Maybe, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't thank you for what you did. Applejack paused for a moment before adding, and besides, if I don't want to blame you for the fight, then that's my business. Sunset wanted to argue. She wanted Applejack to see how this was all her fault. But the words wouldn't come, not after everything that had happened. Whatever. The song changed on the CD, meaning it was half over. She had less than half an hour to convince Applejack to leave her alone. Sunset, why do you act this way? I don't know, Sunset shrugged. I just am how I am. And are you really happy all by yourself all the time? Sunset wondered when the last time she had ever really been happy was. She couldn't remember. People like me don't get to be happy. Although Sunset continued to avoid looking at Applejack, she must have moved to the edge of the bed. Sunset heard rustling, and then Applejack's voice was closer when she said, I don't really believe that. What did Applejack know? She didn't know anything about what Sunset was going through. She didn't know about the nightmares, the hallucinations, the false memories taunting her, always being alone, anything. That's easy for you to say. You live in a picturesque little farmhouse with your perfect family. Maybe in your world you can just hug all your problems away. That's not how things work for me. Applejack got off the bed to sit next to Sunset, bringing the blanket with her. That's not exactly true. Maybe I got some things you don't, but things ain't so perfect for me either. Oh yeah, Sunset scowled as she turned to face Applejack for the first time. Let's hear it then. What's so bad in your world that makes you think you can understand me? What, your little sister gives you a hard time? Your parents didn't buy you the right toys for Christmas? Applejack bowed her head. No, they're gone. Sunset's mouth fell open. Gone? Do you mean they died? Applejack just nodded, and all Sunset could do was remember the things she'd said before the fight. God, I'm such an asshole. Applejack placed a hand on his shoulder. Sunset didn't understand how Applejack could stand to touch her. Hey now, you didn't know. You don't need another thing to beat yourself up over. Sunset clenched her fists. No, fuck this. You don't get to console me right after you tell me something like that. You shouldn't even care about me at all. I've been awful to you for weeks. I've spread rumors about you. You almost died because of me. Yeah, but I didn't. I... Wait, are you? Sunset didn't want to cry, but everything was too much. You almost died, and it would have been all my fault. Shh, it's okay. Applejack moved closer to Sunset, who had wrapped her arms around herself. Here, you look like you're freezing. Although Applejack had to know the cold wasn't responsible for Sunset's shaking, she still wrapped the blanket around her. Hey, it's okay. I'm still here. This was wrong. Sunset needed to push Applejack away. That was the only way to keep her safe. And yet, just like 7 years ago, Sunset found herself crying as Applejack held her. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The odds of this meeting going well were extremely small. On a good day, there would have been more ways it could go wrong than ways it could go right. But today there wasn't a chance this conversation wasn't going to devolve into an argument. It might have been better to avoid it until another day, but Sunset had given her word that she would show up. So, bad outcome or not, she made her way to the bus circle after school. Applejack and Golden Harvest were already talking by the time she showed up. Hey, sorry I'm late, Sunset said as she approached them. Ran into some trouble. Applejack turned and smiled. No problem. How? Goodness sake, what happened to you? Don't worry about it. Sunset took a deep breath through her mouth. Breathing through her nose was difficult through the blood. She ignored Applejack's shocked expression to turn to Golden Harvest so that she might better ignore her shocked expression. Alright, so I know I was awful to you last year, and I wasn't a whole hell of a lot better when we met over winter break, but I want to apologize. Whether it was due to her obviously forced tone or the dry blood on Sunset's face, Golden Harvest didn't seem to have noticed her apology. What did you do this time? Sunset's first instinct was intimidation. Golden Harvest was questioning her? Surely she, of all people, should know better. But, regrettably, that wasn't an option for Applejack's friend, so sarcasm was the best she could get. I was off picking flowers, had a delightful time. Did someone do that to you? Applejack asked. It doesn't matter. Sunset smirked as she tried to defuse the situation. And besides, you hit harder anyway. Unbelievable, Golden Harvest said. I don't know why you think she's changed, AJ. Just look at her. Applejack looked at her pleadingly, and Sunset knew what she wanted. Some explanation that would make it okay for Sunset to have a bloody nose. Some reason that would show Golden Harvest that Sunset was worth trying to fix. Only she wasn't. Sunset wasn't worth Applejack's time, and she knew it. There was no hiding that, and she wasn't about to try. Look, this is a waste of time. I should just go. Sunset turned, but Applejack wasted no time in calling after her. Sunset Shimmer, don't you dare walk away. Sunset turned back and threw her arms out. Why not? Even someone like you has to be able to see this is an awful idea. Applejack folded her arms. Even someone like me? What's that supposed to mean? Sunset facepalmed. Nothing, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Applejack sighed. Alright, fine. But you could at least tell me what happened. Why? What does it matter? Because we're friends, and I don't want bad things happening to my friends. Sunset gestured to herself. Newsflash, AJ. I'm the bad thing here. If you really want to know, I started a fight. That's it. That's all there is to it. Like hell, that's it. Applejack walked closer to her so they were face to face. I'm not as dumb as you seem to think I am. I know fighting isn't the way you do things. I don't think you're dumb. Oh, but you think I'll just accept, oh, don't worry about my face, as an explanation. How is not wanting you to worry the same thing as thinking you're dumb? I see what's going on. You want this to go bad, so then I'll have another reason to give up on you and you can go back to feeling sorry for yourself. Sunset opened her mouth to respond, then realized Applejack was probably right. Applejack clearly knew she'd gained ground on that one, so she dug her feet in. So what happened, Sunset? Sunset looked away. I lost my temper and hit someone. It didn't work out well. Applejack inclined her head. You lose your temper every day, but you don't go around hitting people. So one more time. What happened? Sunset clenched her teeth and gave in. Someone was talking shit about you, okay? More of that stupid fucking rumor, and she didn't shut up when I told her to. So I punched her because I'm an idiot who's too dumb to realize she doesn't know how to fight. Happy now? Applejack shook her head in disbelief. Why would I be happy with that? Do you think I want you fighting people because of me? No. Then why would you do something like that? I don't know. Sunset turned her back to Applejack and neither of them said anything. Golden Harvest said after a while. Should I just, go? Sunset had forgotten about her. No, I'll go. This was never going to work out anyway. Surprisingly, Applejack didn't try to stop Sunset as she walked away. Equally surprisingly, Golden Harvest did. Sunset? Sunset stopped walking and glanced toward Golden Harvest. She looked nervous. Yeah, I still think this is a really bad idea. And I don't forgive you for what happened last year, but if you're really trying to be better, and if Applejack thinks you can, well, I guess I'm willing to give you a chance. It was funny how she thought Sunset cared about any of that. But then Applejack smiled, and Sunset no longer found it funny. She realized she did care, even if not for the right reason. You're right, this is definitely a bad idea. Thanks anyway. Sunset woke with a start. She frantically glanced around, but she could only see darkness. It wasn't real, she reminded herself. It was just a nightmare. It didn't help. No matter what she told herself, she still felt a burn of magenta eyes. She tried to ground herself in reality. She was staying the night at Applejack's house. They were sharing a bed because Applejack had been raised in a home that didn't think that was strange. And even though Sunset did feel weird about that, she never said so. That meant Applejack was right beside her, and nothing bad would happen when Applejack was around. She needed to calm down, or else her shaking would wake her up. Sunset, you okay? Applejack mumbled. Sunset tried to calm herself as much as possible before answering. Yeah. Although she had her back turned towards Applejack, Sunset heard her sitting up. Another nightmare? Sunset squeezed her eyes shut. I'm fine. Go back to sleep, AJ. A hand rested on Sunset's shoulder, and she instinctively pulled away. That would only worry Applejack more, though, and she regretted it immediately. Sunset, you said you'd talk to me about this. That was true, but it had been easy to do that when it was a hypothetical possibility. Now that it had actually come up, Sunset just wanted to ignore it until it went away, like always. With luck, that would keep it from getting worse. I'm gonna turn the light on. Applejack stood up, and after a few moments, there was light. There now. See? Nothing to worry about. Yeah. Sunset felt stupid. She was being childish and keeping Applejack awake because of it. Applejack turned to the bed. So, you want to talk about it? Of course she didn't. What would Applejack think of her if she knew all the things that went through her mind? No, it's better if I don't. You sure about that? Applejack's hand found Sunset's, and she didn't let herself pull away this time. I know it's not fun to talk about, but this keeps happening. I'm sorry. I'm being a pain, I know. What? Applejack sounded perplexed. You think I'm worried about being woken up? That don't bother me none. Sunset was being stupid. She had to at least look at Applejack. This wasn't a dream, and Applejack was real. Sunset had to trust that. Stealing her nerve, she turned towards her friend. It was Applejack, nothing out of the ordinary. Sunset sighed in relief. You ever think you wake up from a dream, but then you're just in a different one? Uh-huh. Is that what you're worried about whenever you wake up? Sunset nodded. That makes sense, but I'm here to remind you that this isn't a dream. Applejack chuckled. I mean, I don't think you have nightmares about me. Sunset remained silent. Er, do you have nightmares about me? Sometimes. Sunset noticed Applejack's expression shift and realized how that might sound. Sometimes I see you and I think it's going to be okay, but then you're not breathing, and I can't get you to start again. Oh. They would occasionally joke about the fight at the lake, but they never talked about what happened after. Well, I am, and I'm not going anywhere. You can count on that. Sunset frowned and looked away. That should be reassuring, but Sunset could only focus on one thought. Applejack still didn't know how crazy Sunset really was. You don't. You wouldn't. I wouldn't understand, Applejack guessed. Sunset shook her head. If you knew, you wouldn't. Applejack, I'm really messed up. I, uh, I hate to break it to you, but that's not exactly new. How, how far back do you remember? Do you remember before kindergarten? Applejack seemed confused by the apparent subject change. She didn't push. I guess a little, just a few things, you know? Sunset gave the hollow laugh. I don't. Applejack shrugged. I bet a lot of people don't. I remember the day I was found. I was 5 years old, lost and alone. I didn't know where my home was or who my parents were or anything. The only thing I knew was my name, and that was just something I read. I don't actually even know if Sunset Shimmer is me or if it's someone else's name. Oh, jeez. Applejack smiled reassuringly. Well, whatever was in your past, you're you now. The doctor said I would get my memories back, and then when I didn't, they said it was because I was so young. Sunset hesitated. How much could she tell Applejack? She wanted to trust Applejack, but she couldn't lose her. I I remember something, but it's something crazy. What is it? When Sunset didn't answer right away, Applejack squeezed her hand. It's okay. You can tell me anything. Applejack's hand was so warm. Sunset's life had been cold for so long, but now she had Applejack in it, and she didn't have to be lost and alone anymore. I know this is impossible, but I have memories of this whole other world. Applejack didn't even miss a beat. Okay, so what was it like? Unlike Applejack, Sunset was full of hesitation. Applejack waited patiently for her reply, however. It was a 5-year-old's fantasy land, but even today it still feels real in my memories. So, like, fairies and unicorns and stuff? Sunset smiled at how close that was. Well, there weren't any fairies. Aw, come on now. It ain't a proper fantasy land without fairies. Somehow, Applejack always managed to ease Sunset's worries just by being herself. It was called a Sunset stopped. She never allowed herself to even think of that name. But when she looked into Applejack's eyes and saw her silent encouragement to continue, Sunset gave in. Equestria. There weren't any humans. Instead, there were ponies. Griffins, dragons, and some other things too, but mostly ponies. Applejack's smile never faltered. Alright, so then what about you? Sunset smiled as well, although it was mostly out of embarrassment. I was a unicorn. As soon as the gate was open, Sunset knew there was no stopping herself. Applejack was willing to listen and encourage her, even if it was absolutely crazy. I was a magical prodigy, the personal student of the princess. But then one day, she showed me this mirror. What clubs you want to check out? Applejack asked as they drove. They were squished together in Big Mac's truck as he drove them to the Canterlot High School freshman fair. Sunset hadn't bothered going to the open house, and she was only going to the school because Applejack was, but she'd been talked into going to the freshman fair. I don't know. I'm not even sure I want to join any clubs at all. Oh, right. Applejack nudged her. We wouldn't want to do anything that might damage that tough girl persona now, would we? You do know me so well." In truth, that tough girl persona had fallen to her feet. She tried maintaining her position at Everfree Middle School while still being Applejack's friend, but since there was no way Applejack would condone that, she'd had to lie about things all the time. Eventually, the guilt caught up to her, and Sunset just gave up. And when it came down to it, she felt a lot better after she did. She had Applejack and, to an extent, even Golden Harvest, and that was better than running the school had ever been. Sunset was surprised to realize that she was actually sorry to hear that Golden Harvest would be going to a different high school than Applejack and herself. But all in all, leaving Everfree Middle School behind was a good thing. Sunset could start over at a new school, nothing from her past holding her back. Or so she thought, until they pulled up to the building. Sunset recognized it. Her nightmares had subsided a lot in recent times, but this place had been a vivid part of them for years. Applejack shook her to get her attention. "You okay?" Yeah." Sunset's eyes flickered between Applejack and Big Mac, who was too focused on parking to notice. "Just a little nervous about today." Applejack nodded. "It'll be all right." Applejack's hand found Sunset's and gave it a quick squeeze, and she knew it was understood that neither of them was talking about the fair. "High school isn't so bad," Big Mac said. "You girls get yourself into a good club, make yourself some good friends, and you'll be just fine." "Easy for you to say," Applejack shot back. "You already graduated." Big Mac chuckled. "And that makes me an expert. Trust me, these years will fly by." Big Mac let them out and reminded them that he'd be back in a few hours. They waved goodbye, then Applejack wasted no time in getting into the matter at hand. "What's going on, Sunset?" Sunset kept her voice low. "Remember that story about when I came here from, the other place?" "Yeah, of course." Sunset looked around. "This is where I came out. There's a statue on the other side of the school. That's the portal." "Well, all right then." Applejack smiled and grabbed Sunset's hand. "What are we doing waiting around here for?" While Applejack tried to walk off, Sunset wouldn't be moved, but she kept her grip on Applejack's hand, suddenly terrified of letting go. Applejack didn't try to force her, and instead stepped closer. Her voice was soft and comforting. "Hey now, don't tell me you're afraid." "I don't... What if..." Applejack pulled her into a hug. "Neither of us know what's gonna happen, but here's what I do know. No matter what, I'll be here with you the whole way." Sunset tried to speak, but she could only manage a nod. "All right then, let's go find this statue." It had been a few weeks since Sunset had started going to Canterlot High School, and things kept popping up, most notably Principal Celestia, but a few other faculty seemed way too familiar. It had been Applejack who first spoke what Sunset had been thinking. What if Sunset's memories weren't fake? What if she really had come from another world? For whatever reason, Applejack seemed willing to accept that. Sunset wasn't sure how she could have ever managed this without her. Unfortunately, the two didn't share any classes together. But much to her surprise, Sunset actually found herself talking with other classmates. Meanwhile, Applejack did more than just talk and wound up making some friends of her own. But of course, she was always more sociable than Sunset would ever be. Sunset had met a few of them here and there around the school, but they had finally arranged a meeting with all 6 of them for the first time. Sunset walked through the mall until she heard someone calling out to her. "Sunset, over here!" She turned to see Pinkie Pie waving at her. Pinkie seemed to know everyone in the school already, even though she was a freshman like the rest of them. Sunset smiled as she approached the table with her and the other girls. "Hi, Pinkie," Sunset said as she took a seat next to Applejack. She took a quick look around. She recognized Rarity from her English class, but they had only ever found reason to speak on a few occasions. Meanwhile, she recognized Rainbow Dash as the school's rising star athlete, and Applejack had already introduced them a few days before. That just left one person she didn't know. "Hey there, my name's Sunset," she said to a girl with yellow skin and long pink hair. "Oh, I'm Fluttershy." "Fluttershy's a little, well, shy," Applejack said, "but I'm sure you two will get along great." "Well, it's nice to meet you, Fluttershy." Sunset flashed a smile, which Fluttershy returned. Yeah, we'll all be best friends and all that, Rainbow said. But let's get down to what's really important. What movie are we going to go see? Rarity lit up. My vote is for the new... No, Rainbow and Applejack said at the same time. Sorry, Raz, Applejack said, but vampires ain't supposed to sparkle. Besides, you and Fluttershy already saw that one, Rainbow added. I want to see that monster movie. Oh, that looks scary, Fluttershy said. Although Sunset wanted to see it too, she wasn't sure if Fluttershy could handle that. I heard it's just a bunch of shaky camera footage, and you don't even get to see the monster in it. There's that cute animated movie about the robots, Fluttershy suggested. Rainbow Dash looked crestfallen. Animated? Come on, Shy, we're not kids. Rarity regarded Rainbow skeptically. Oh, please, as if you don't still watch that silly show about those muscle heads with the spiky hair. That's different, Rainbow insisted. Applejack rolled her eyes. Sure it is. Anyway, I happen to like cartoons, so I'd be fine with the robot one. In truth, Sunset wasn't terribly interested in cartoons either, but she doubted they were going to find something everyone liked equally, so she decided to cast her vote with the others and be done with it. Sorry, Rainbow, but it sounds like you're outvoted. I'm okay with the robots. Maybe we can do a superhero movie or something next time. At least Fluttershy seemed excited enough to make up for Rainbow's disappointment. I don't suppose I could sway any of you with a romantic comedy? Rarity asked. Robots it is, Rainbow relented, causing everyone to laugh. There was a lot to love about life at CHS. Starting with the day at the mall, the six girls had become inseparable. Even when Sunset finally made friends at Everfree, it had really been focused around Applejack, while her history had prevented her from becoming truly close with Golden Harvest. But now she was part of a group, and every one of them could be considered a true friend, which was still a lot for Sunset to take in. She'd been alone for so long that being one of six could be intimidating. But she always had Applejack looking out for her, and she found herself becoming closer with, of all people, Fluttershy. The two of them were more often than not the ones choosing to sit out on big group activities, preferring to just watch. Although occasionally, the others didn't make that easy. Hey, Sunset, bet I can beat you in this game? They were having a slumber party at Rainbow's house, and the others were preoccupied. Rarity was doing Fluttershy's makeup, while Applejack was helping Pinkie bake cookies for everyone. That left Sunset as Rainbow's only possible opponent, although she wasn't particularly interested in going head-to-head with the overly competitive girl. She tapped her chin as she pretended to consider it. Well, considering I've never played it and barely played video games at all, I'd say you've got a pretty decent shot. Alright, fine, then you can be on my team and we'll play against the computer. Sunset looked at the game in question and smirked. You sure about this? There's robots in it, so you might cry at the ending again. The robots were in love, Rainbow said while blushing furiously. Rarity and Fluttershy giggled from the corner. It had been a cheap shot, so Sunset decided to make up for it by going along with playing Rainbow's video game. Alright, I'll give it a shot, but don't blame me when I get us killed. Having so many friends was intimidating. Sunset still made a lot of mistakes, occasionally taking jokes too far or losing her temper over frivolous things. But even so, she wouldn't change things for the world. It was great to have a lot of friends, but Sunset was glad to still have plenty of one-on-one time with Applejack. It was late autumn, and the two of them were on a break from doing chores around Sweet Apple Acres. Sunset spent most of her weekends there, and the apples had come to regard her as a regular part of their farm. That sometimes meant helping out with work, but Sunset was happy to. Sunset and Applejack were just sitting together and talking while drinking apple cider, and there was a lull in the conversation. But rather than feeling awkward, the moment was perfect. They had been busy all morning, and there was still more to do in the afternoon, but that left Sunset feeling accomplished, and she couldn't ask to be in better company. Well, suppose we better get back to it, Applejack said after a while. Hey, Applejack? Yeah? I love you. It had been on Sunset's mind for ages. She had finally decided to tell Applejack, but could never find the right way to do that. Eventually, it seemed, she just gave up. Applejack only seemed confused for a moment, then she threw her arm around Sunset's shoulder. Aw, I love you too. Really? Sunset had been thinking about this conversation for months, and never did she think it would be this simple. But this seemed too simple. Wait, how do you mean that? I, Now Applejack looked more than momentarily confused. How did you mean it? I meant, I love you. I'm in love with you. When Applejack didn't respond immediately, Sunset added, in the gay way? Applejack shook her head to clear her confusion. I, uh, I think we meant it in different ways. Sunset bowed her head and wondered if Applejack even realized she still had an arm around her. Right, sorry, I just made things awkward. Nah, of course you didn't. Applejack tightened her grip on her half hug and smiled. I'm just, well, I don't even like guys yet, let alone girls. I probably should have brought that part up first. Sunset found herself chuckling, even after her failed attempt at romance. Applejack still had an arm around her, and that was good enough. Besides, it'd make things a little weird with the surprise coming up. What surprise? Applejack just laughed. Now, if I told you that, it wouldn't be a surprise now, would it? But just wait, it's gonna be great. And then she said it'd be weird because of some surprise, but she won't tell me what it is. Sunset and Fluttershy were at the animal shelter she volunteered at. For some reason, Sunset had become the go-to person to ask when they needed extra help. But she didn't mind. It was peaceful, the animals were a lot of fun, and Fluttershy was easy to talk to. I didn't want to make things weird. But, that's not what she said, is it? Fluttershy asked. She said it would be weird, not that it was weird. I guess. And she hasn't changed how she's acting or anything. Even that same day, Sunset had still spent the night at Applejack's, who was every bit as friendly and affectionate as always. But she also said she loves me, so I don't know. I don't think I really always get what people mean when they say things. Fluttershy giggled. Oh, that part's not hard. I love Rainbow, but not as a girlfriend or anything. We've been friends since we were little, and she's more like a sister than anything. Sunset shrugged. I guess. I'm sure everything will be okay with Applejack. You're just overthinking things. Again. Yeah, you're probably right. Fluttershy smiled with admiration. I still can't believe you told her. That was so brave of you. Sunset rolls her eyes. Not really, it's just 3 words. I don't think I could do that, especially with, another girl. Everyone makes it out like it's so much harder, but honestly, I don't think it would have made a difference to me either way. Girl or guy, it's just a matter of saying it. Fluttershy looked down. For you, maybe. But you're so confident in yourself. Sunset quirked her head to the side. Are you saying you have your eye on someone, Shy? No. Oh, you do. Who is it? Fluttershy blushed furiously. No one. I don't. I just. Sunset laughed and patted her on the back. Hey, I'm just teasing. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, although I am all ears if you do want to talk. Fluttershy took a deep breath. I know. Thank you, Sunset. No problem. I'm happy to be here for you, you know? Fluttershy smiled and nodded. Yeah, I do. The seasons changed and another year came to a close. Snow covered the town, which always brought back memories of impenetrable ice and burning cold water. But that had been 2 years ago, and things changed. Sunset had spent the day in a daze. It all seemed surreal, like watching a scene from someone else's life. These types of things didn't happen to her, even in these past few years in which everything had been so much better. But as Sunset stepped out of Big Mac's truck carrying a box of her possessions, she knew this was real. So much of her life felt like fantasy when she looked back on it, but this was good and it was real. She carried the box into Applejack's room, or rather, into what she had always thought of as Applejack's room, although it was now something else as well. She placed the box on top of her dresser, which they had brought in earlier. Feeling a little overwhelmed, she sat down in the bottom of the new bunk bed. She took a look around the room, which was now partly hers. Applejack came in carrying another box, which she set beside the one Sunset had brought in. She smiled as she sat down on the bed beside her and clapped her on the back. Welcome home. It was late in the evening on a Saturday, so Canterlot High School was empty when Sunset walked into its courtyard. She just had to hope that no one would stop her because she really didn't have a good explanation for why she was there. There was only one destination on her mind, so she made her way directly to the statue. She stopped short of touching it, however, and just stared at her reflection on its smooth surface. She sat down beside it, making sure she didn't accidentally lean on it. She sat in contemplation for a long time, not so much wondering what to do, but contemplating where her life was in relation to where it had been. She pulled off her backpack and took out a notebook and a pen, and reflected on how long it had been since she wrote the words she was about to write. Dear Princess Celestia, there are no words to start this letter, not really. So much has happened since I was your student. I can finally see that I'm not who I always thought I was, although I'm not sure I know exactly who I am yet. That's why I'm writing to you instead of coming myself. I know I failed as your student. I excelled at every lesson except for the ones that really mattered. Perhaps worst of all, I took you and everything you did for me for granted. You deserve so much more from a student than I could ever give you. And I'm not sure I'm what I wish I could be, what you always saw in me. I get angry all the time. I say things I shouldn't. I'm cynical. I'm egotistical. In short, I'm not always an easy person to get along with. But some people have been doing their best, and for the first time in my life, I can finally appreciate them for that. I was adopted by a family in this world, and they accept me as one of their own. I'm not sure I'll ever be able to see them as family, well, except for one of them. But I'm thankful, and I work hard to do what I can for them. I even have friends now, a whole group of people who care about me just as I care about them. That's the main thing I want to tell you. I'm trying. I know I've still got a long way to go, but I'm trying to be a better person. I know it's late, but I think of all the lessons you tried to teach me, and I try to live up to them. I'm not ready to meet you again right now. Not while I still have so far to go, but I do want to see you again. It'll be another 30 moons before the portal opens again. When that time comes, I want to cross it and tell you about all the things I've done, and show you the person that I've become. I'm sorry it took me 9 years to write this, and I'm sorry that I have to ask you to wait even more. I can only promise to try to be someone worth waiting for. Sincerely, your gifted student, Sunset Shimmer. Sunset stood up and faced the statue. Either something magical was about to happen, or she was going to feel really stupid. But when she tossed the notebook towards the statue, it vanished without a trace. Sunset stared dumbfounded. Once she shook herself of her stupor, she couldn't help but smile. She turned and walked back to the bus stop, feeling lighter than air the whole way. It seemed that she had another reason to try and be the best person she could be. As soon as she was off the stage, everyone ran over to congratulate Rarity. They all talked at once, making it hard to hear individual praises, but it was clear that everyone was excited for their friend. Thank you all so much, Rarity said. Then she turned to Sunset specifically. And thank you, Sunset. I couldn't have done this without you. Sunset scratched her neck awkwardly. I didn't do that much. Didn't do that much? Rarity threw an arm around Sunset. Why, you only masterminded my whole Spring Fling campaign. If that's not that much, then I simply don't know what is. Aw, I was happy to. And besides, you were the one who actually won it. Tonight it's your show, Princess. Although Sunset was afraid she'd continue heaping on the unneeded praise, Rarity yielded at Princess to let out a giddy laugh. With the crown awarded, the Spring Fling kicked off in full force. Everyone found themselves on the dance floor, and Sunset was no exception. Perhaps it had been helping Rarity win the crown, but for whatever reason, Sunset found herself having the time of her life. They were halfway through their junior year, and yet this was the first time she had actually enjoyed any of the school dances. Because she was enjoying herself so much, it took a while for Sunset to notice that someone was missing from their group. She left the others to sneak to the sidelines, where Fluttershy was watching everyone else. Had enough dancing? Sunset asked. Oh, I don't know if dancing is really my thing, Fluttershy said, but I have fun watching everyone. Sunset nodded. I wouldn't say dancing is really my thing either. It is fun once in a while, though. You're right. Maybe I'll go back out in a little bit. The song changed to a slower one, and single people left the dance floor as couples partnered up. Fluttershy smiled at the change. Oh, I like this song. Sunset was smiling as well. You know, you and I were always the ones sitting out and watching the others, especially when we first met. Fluttershy nodded. It's fun to watch, especially with good company. It is, but sometimes it's worth taking a chance and joining in. Sunset held out her hand. Dance with me? Fluttershy reached up her hand as if to accept, but stopped short. But this is a slow song. Yeah, Sunset said. I know. Very slowly, Fluttershy placed her hand in Sunset's. The party didn't end when the dance did. They all piled into Pinky's minivan and drove back to Sweet Apple Acres, where they had planned their post-dance slumber party. But since everyone had tired themselves out dancing, it wound up being more slumber than party. Sunset was in the kitchen grabbing them some soda in the hopes of keeping everyone going when Pinky sought her out. Hiya, Sonny. Hey, Pinky, Rainbow pass out yet? She said she'd just take a quick nap. Sunset grinned. She had no doubt that nap would last until the morning. Well, more soda for the rest of us, then. Pinky jumped up to sit on the counter. You know, Fluttershy stepped outside to get some air. Oh yeah? Sunset smirked. She had a pretty good idea where this was going. Yup, it'd be the perfect time to talk to her. Pinky leaned forward to add, in private. Now what would I have to talk to Fluttershy in private about? Pinky shrugged. I don't know. Dinosaurs? Sunset laughed, then leaned against the counter beside Pinky. She passed her a can of soda before opening one for herself. I guess I want to, but I'm worried about her reaction. Last time I did something like this, it didn't work out for me. Pinky took a sip from her drink. Did the person do something crazy, like hate you for it? No. Did they stop being your friend? Sunset rolled her eyes. No, it didn't even get too weird. Things went back to normal pretty quickly. That doesn't sound like it didn't work out. Sunset drank some of her soda while she thought. Yeah, I guess you have a point. Thanks, Pinky. Hmm? I didn't do anything. I'm just making conversation. Sunset chuckled. Of course. Could you bring that soda to the others? Okie dokie Loki. Sunset chugged the rest of her soda, threw the can in the recycling, and stepped out the kitchen door. She looked around to see where Fluttershy might be and decided the garden would be the best bet. It was also the hardest bet. Among other things, Sunflower taller than Sunset made it hard to see into the garden. She could have walked through it while looking for Fluttershy, but she decided to take a different approach. Marco. She heard Fluttershy giggle before answering. Polo. Sunset smiled as she followed the sound of Fluttershy's voice and found her sitting on a small stone bench that was practically covered in plants. It was meant for one person, but Fluttershy still scooted to the side so Sunset could sit beside her. They didn't talk at first, each of them just enjoying the cool night air as they watched the stars above them. It's a beautiful night, Sunset said gently after a while. Yeah, it is. Are you comfortable here? I could get another chair if you want. Fluttershy shook her head. No, this is okay. Sunset reached her arm around Fluttershy's back, holding on to her waist. And is this also okay? Fluttershy leaned against Sunset, resting her head against Sunset's shoulder. This is perfect. They sat in silence, enjoying the peace in each other's presence. At one point, Sunset placed her other hand on Fluttershy's stomach, so that she was holding her in both arms as best she could while side by side. Fluttershy tilted her back to smile at her, and Sunset closed the distance between them. The kiss was also perfect. Sunset's nerves threatened to be the end of her. One way or another, everything was changing tonight. She barely could focus on the conversation going on around her. Fluttershy placed a hand on her cheek. It'll be okay, Sonny. Sunset moved her hand to cover Fluttershy's, enjoying the warmth against her face. I hope so. You should listen to her, Pinkie said. Shy's a really smart cookie. That got Sunset to smile a little. How did you even hear that from the driver's seat? Oh, Sonny, I hear everything. Pinkie was driving them, since her minivan was the only thing that could fit all 6 friends. Rarity sat beside her in the front, Applejack and Rainbow took the middle, and Sunset was in the back with Fluttershy. It was the middle of the night, but they were going to Canterlot High School, where Sunset's life was going to change forever. Remember that no matter what, we're here with you, Applejack said. Through thick and thin, as they say, Rarity added. Sunset shifted in her seat. She knew what she saw when she threw the notebook into the portal, but it had been 2 years ago, and it was hard to not have doubts. Even if I'm batshit crazy? You know, after sharing a room with you for the past 3 years, I gotta say, Applejack looked back and grinned. You're batshit crazy no matter what happens tonight. Besides, crazy is good, Pinkie said. We're your friends, Rainbow said. Whether this portal thing works or not, we're not going anywhere. Precisely, Rarity said. We're here for you, darling, because we're your friends. We were your friends before you told us of this other world, and we're certainly not going to stop being your friends if things don't work out with it. Rainbow Dash was practically bouncing in her seat. Although I'm really hoping this works, because that would be so awesome. It will be, Fluttershy said. Oddly enough, she had seemed more convinced of Equestria than Sunset had been. Pinkie pulled into the empty parking lot of Canterlot High, and the 6 girls walked across it and onto the courtyard. It felt strange to be at school so late, and Sunset was worried someone might see them and chase them off. But nobody came, and soon enough, they found themselves in front of the statue. So, Applejack adjusted her hat. How's it work? I think we just have to walk into it, Sunset said. She swallowed a lump in her throat and stepped forward. A hand took hold of hers, fingers locking together. She turned to see Fluttershy smiling. We'll go together. Sunset nodded. Side by side and with all of their friends behind them, they walked into the portal and the world disappeared around them. Sunset fell to the ground and made no attempt to get up. Once again, she struggled to piece together what was real and what wasn't, as everything she had just experienced battled against the life she had actually lived. There was too much to take in to even think about anything, but things slowly fell back into place. Applejack wasn't her sister. Fluttershy wasn't her girlfriend. Pinkie, Rainbow, and Rarity weren't her friends. Sunset didn't even have any friends. 2 different lives in 2 different worlds. A life of magic and adventure spent with the most mismatched family she could imagine, and Sunset had been happy. A life of high school dances and young love spent with a group of friends that were as close as they were different, and Sunset had been happy. Neither world had given her everything she wanted, but Sunset had been happy, and that had been enough for her. When she looked up, she saw she was already back at the Trail of Ash. It was what she had made for herself. She pulled herself to her feet and took a good look around. The vague shapes she had seen in the distance were clear now. Other paths and adornments surrounded her. There was a path of stone, moss growing over it. There was a path of glass, perfectly pristine. There was a dilapidated wooden path, which looked like it might collapse at any moment. The paths all intertwined, an infinite number of places she could have made a different decision and wound up with a different life. Sunset turned her head. Her path had felt familiar before, now it felt restraining. It was the sum of everything Sunset had made for herself, and it just wasn't good enough. And what did she get? What was waiting for her at the end of the path? There was only one way to find out. Summoning all her determination, Sunset marched forward. When memories popped up, Flash asking her out, the decision to stay at CHS instead of going to Crystal Prep, Sunset ignored them. She knew what decisions she had made, and she had seen enough of what could have been. Before long, she started running. She ran past memories without even looking to see what they were. She ran through the red spider lilies, ignoring them even as they grew ever more plentiful. She ran past paths that diverged from her own, pushing herself ever forward. The path opened into a field of flowers, lycoris radiata as far as she could see. Sunset knew she was close and ran through them. She just had to cross the field and then she'd be free. She could already see the night sky in the distance. Something stood in front of her. Sunset wasn't sure what it was at first, but once she moved closer and it became more clear, she stopped in her tracks. The field of flowers came to an end, and just at the end stood a statue of a horse rearing up into the air. She had seen it in the school courtyard every day at school, but here it towered over her and cast its gaze down, stone eyes judging her. And beyond, there was nothing. No paths, not an endless sea of white, just empty space. "This is it," Sunset's voice said from behind her. "This is all there is." Sunset turned around and found herself face to face with her reflection. "What do you mean?" The reflection smirked. "Sorry, princess, but you don't have a choice anymore. You've had choices, tons of them, and, well, you blew every last one." Sunset bowed her head. It was true. There had been far more than those 2 chances for Sunset to turn her life into one worth living. But she had always pushed forward with accomplishing her goals of making sure she was the best. It's a shame, really. You came so damn close to accomplishing something great, but you just couldn't cut it in the end, and, well, here we are. Sunset looked down at her hand. What had Sunset done? She'd gotten the crown, but once she placed it on her head, she clenched her hand into a fist and looked up. "I don't accept that." "Oh?" The reflection seemed delighted to hear that. "And what do you think would happen if you could leave here? Do you think everyone will just laugh and forget what you did? Maybe you still don't remember, but I turned into you." Sunset folded her arms. "I remember everything now." "Oh, don't act holier than thou with me. You got what you always wanted." "You're right, more power than I ever imagined, and yeah, I loved it." "Of course you did." The reflection spread out her arms and fire moved over her body, transforming her into a demon. "This is who we always should have been." "No, that's part of who I am, but that doesn't have to be all I'll ever be." Sunset turned and took a step towards the statue. "Don't walk away from me!" There was a blaze of fire between Sunset and the statue, and the demon appeared before her. "You don't get it. It's over." "Why? Because you say it is? I've done a lot of things wrong, but I've never given up before, and I'm sure as hell not going to start now." "Fine. We'll do this the hard way." The demon snapped her fingers, and the field of flowers burst into flame. Sunset twisted around wildly, looking for anywhere she could go, but she was already surrounded. The fire started in the distance, but it was closing fast. She could already feel the heat. "So what do you think you'll do from here? All you know how to do is consume." What would happen if the flames reached her? Could she die in this place? It seemed that the demon knew what was in her thoughts. "This isn't one of your little nightmares. There's no waking up from this one." There was no going back. There was no hiding. But it didn't matter. This was what Sunset had made for herself, and she was done running away from it. She took a step towards the demon. "No." "What?" "No. I won't accept this. It's my life, and I'll decide when to stop. I may have burned some bridges that I'll never get back, but I know now that there's always another way." The demon took a step back. "There's no coming back from what you did, princess. You don't get to live a normal life after tonight." "You don't know what happens from here any more than I do," Sunset smirked, "and that's what you're afraid of." As she advanced, the demon caused the fire to expand. The flames were almost at Sunset. "You are nothing without me." "To tell the truth, I don't even know who I am without you." Sunset stopped right before the demon. "And I'm afraid too. I'm afraid of finding out who I am without all the titles and the power. But I'm still going to find out." The demon backed up so that she was directly under the statue. "There's nothing after this. You're at the end. There's no other way to go." "Then I'll make one." The demon clenched her fist, and for a moment Sunset thought she was going to charge. But then her expression shifted from anger to disappointment as she regarded Sunset. Pathetic. The demon turned to ash and the fire died down. Sunset looked around her and saw nothing but ash as far as the eye could see. Sunset walked forward. towards the statue and the pile of ash underneath it. When Sunset bent down to examine it more closely, she noticed it wasn't all ash. She reached into it and pulled out a flower, warm from the hot ash. 6 pink petals emerging from a yellow center, lycoris squamigera. Sunset took it with her as she walked under the statue, stopping short of where the path ended. There was nothing past it, just empty space. She took a step. Everything was too much. So many thoughts ran through Sunset's head that she didn't have the chance to focus on any of them. For the third time, Sunset's mind struggled to piece together what was real. She was on her hands and knees with her head down, and there was smoke everywhere. For a moment, the smoke played a trick on her mind, and she thought she saw a demon's hands where her own should be. But when the smoke cleared, it was just her. Memories came rushing back, everything that Sunset had done, both before and after getting the crown. She knew the whole school would be watching her, and it was time to face what she had done, time to own up to her mistakes. Somehow, that was even more daunting than facing down her own demon. "You will never rule in Equestria," Twilight said from above her. "Any power that you may have had in this world is gone. Tonight, you've shown everyone who you really are. You've shown them what is in your heart." When she looked up at Twilight, Sunset had tears in her eyes. I'm sorry," she choked out, although she knew she could never hope for that to be enough. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know there was another way." Painfully aware of the eyes on her, Sunset crawled out of the crater she found herself in as Twilight spoke. "The magic of friendship doesn't just exist in Equestria. It's everywhere. You can seek it out, or you can forever be alone. The choice is yours." But all I've ever done since being here is drive everyone apart. I don't know the first thing about friendship." To her astonishment, Sunset felt a hand grab hold of hers. Twilight smiled as she helped her to her feet. "I bet they can teach you." Twilight gestured toward her friends, the same ones that Sunset had tormented for years. Fluttershy lingered behind in the back. Rainbow Dash hovered on wings that she must have got from the same magic that had broken Sunset's demon form. Ever the sensible one, Rarity still seemed skeptical as she regarded Sunset, although she soon smiled with the others. But it seemed that Pinkie Pie, on the other hand, was instantly excited by the turn of events. And Applejack? Applejack stood in front of all the others. She had her eyes fixed directly on Sunset, and her smile was warm and welcoming.